Dear colleagues, I rise today as the critic of Bill 204, an act to amend the Canadian Environmental Protection Act 1999, a bill that will prohibit the export of certain type of plastic waste to foreign countries for final disposal. First, let me thank the Member of Parliament for York Simcoe, Mr. Scott Davidson, and our colleague Senator Fromm for raising this important issue of final disposal of our plastic waste. In this speech, I will address the reasons for this type of legislation and my agreement to its principle. I worked my entire career on identifying, assessing, and solving pollution and contamination problems created by domestic or hazardous industrial waste. These problems affect human health and safety as well as that of ecosystems that provide with ecological services essential to our survival. Too numerous times to be mentioned here, I have witnessed firsthand the negative impact of our irresponsible, ever-growing waste-producing habits and handling of toxic substances. Typical landfill operations stockpile all kinds of objects that could have been recycled, but instead become macro and microplastics that will find their way to water bodies, initiating their path into the food web. One view that is still very fresh in my mind are the numerous fish from Chaudière River that develop tumors and deformations after the Lac Mégantic oil spill. Who will eat these fish? Do you know that scientists found microplastic in human lungs, livers, spleens, kidneys, and recently in human placenta? Colleagues, it's not secret. Humanity has a global waste problem, and if we don't manage it in a sustainable way, as our population grows, we will further intoxicate our lives. Every year, 280 billion tons of groundwater is polluted by landfill leachate containing contaminants, a source of water which a quarter of Canadians and at least half of the world's population rely on to survive. The use of land for our billions of tons of waste every year reduces our capacity to stop deforestation, to fight climate change, or to offer healthy environment for human and wildlife alike. So, to minimize the contamination of our land, we rely on foreign countries and on the oceans. In the end, 13 million tons of plastic end up in the oceans each year, pollute the waters, and destroy oceanic ecosystems. More than half of this plastic is less dense than the water and thus will float. Once this plastic enters ocean currents, they are unlikely to leave the area until they degrade into smaller microplastics under the effect of sun, waves, and marine life. As more and more plastic is discarded into the environment, the plastic concentration in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch will only continue to increase. This floating plastic patch covers an estimated surface area of 1.6 million square kilometers, an area the size of my province of Quebec. At this rate, there will be more plastic than fish in the sea by 2050. Canada is no shining example for the rest of the world. In fact, we are among the world's waste producers, with an estimated 1.33 billion metric tons of waste for 36.1 tons per person in 2017. Canada ranks as the most wasteful country per capita. The difference in waste production per province and territory is noticeable, with provinces such as Alberta and Saskatchewan producing more than double the amount per capita of provinces like Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island. Here, it is worth noticing that this data comes from a total per province that includes domestic, industrial, and municipal waste, all divided by the respective provincial population. The waste problem is increasing in Canada, and it goes beyond plastic. I hope we will address this problem holistically with robust legislation. In 2016, we generated 12.3 million tons of plastic, with only 9% of it being properly recycled, 4% being incinerated for energy recovery, and an incredible 86% being sent to landfills. Take a moment to reflect on the sheer amount of plastic waste sitting in landfills across the country right now that will persist for generations. The main offender, representing almost half of total plastic waste in Canada, is the packaging sector, followed by the automotive, textile, electric and electronic equipment, and construction sectors. Pourquoi c'est urgent de résoudre les problèmes des déchets en plastique? Parce que ce n'est pas seulement un problème de matière entreposée, c'est aussi un problème de santé, c'est aussi un problème environnemental. Et si cela n'est pas assez important pour vous, il faut savoir que c'est aussi un problème économique énorme. J'ajouterai aussi que comme mère et grand-mère, c'est aussi un problème moral qui cause beaucoup de dommages autour du monde. Historiquement et encore aujourd'hui, notre économie suit un modèle linéaire: extraction, production et élimination. Au plus de 60% de toutes les ressources naturelles extraites finissent en déchets. Quel gâchis! Quel manque d'efficacité et d'efficience! Ce modèle économique totalement dépassé dépend de l'hypothèse fausse et illogique que notre planète a des ressources infinies et que nous pouvons croître infiniment. Un tel système n'existe pas sur notre planète. Par ailleurs, des scientifiques en 2009 ont décrit les limites de 9 systèmes planétaires essentiels à la survie de la vie sur Terre telle comme on la connaît. Et aujourd'hui, nous avons déjà dépassé 4 de ces limites: l'instabilité du climat, la perte de la biodiversité, l'utilisation des terres et les cycles de nutriments. Nous devons transformer notre modèle de consommation vers une économie circulaire maintenant. Utiliser nos ressources naturelles plus efficacement, empêcher les produits et les matériaux de devenir des déchets le plus longtemps possible, transformer les déchets qui ne peuvent être évités en une nouvelle ressource sont des étapes clés pour parvenir à une économie plus durable et plus circulaire. Celles-ci peuvent stimuler et assurer la stabilité économique tant demandée par les investisseurs et les industriels, ainsi que créer des millions d'emplois en développant et implémentant des technologies propres. L'ordre d'action pour une gestion durable des déchets est clair: réduire à la source, réutilisation, recyclage, récupération de l'énergie et encapsulation finale des résidus ultimes. Tel est le modèle de gestion des déchets prôné par tous les experts en gestion des matières résiduelles dans le monde, y compris par des organismes multinationaux comme la OECD, dont le Canada fait partie. Pourtant, le Canada a historiquement choisi de mettre l'emphase sur la troisième option, soit en créant l'industrie du recyclage. En notant les statistiques de recyclage de plastique d'aujourd'hui, nos faibles tentatives de saine gestion des déchets, il faut le reconnaître, sont un échec total. Nous avons créé une industrie entière de recyclage qui est peu efficace. Nos matières recyclées sont très peu utilisées dans la manufacture de nouveaux produits. Les manufactures d'emballage, les preneurs de l'obsolescence programmée et les gaspilleurs de matières n'assument aucune responsabilité, ce qui résulte en zéro circularité. En sautant les 2 premières étapes de toute bonne gestion des déchets, nous réduisons massivement nos opportunités de réduction des déchets. In fact, through the funding of our own Department of Environment and Climate Change Canada, a 2019 report entitled Economic Study of the Canadian Plastic Industry, Markets and Waste stated that in 2016, Canada lost an $8 billion opportunity from unrecovered plastic material, a number that will grow to $11 billion by 2030. This same report states that by diverting 90% of plastic waste out of landfills and back into the production cycle by 2030, Canada could save $500 million per year. It could also create 42,000 direct and indirect jobs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1.8 million tons of CO2 per year. Why we are not doing that? The world is looking to decarbonize and better waste management is a major factor. In 2019, the ECCC published a discussion paper entitled "A Proposed Integrated Management Approach to Plastic Products to Prevent Waste Pollution," in which it adopted a target of at least 50% recycled content in plastic products by 2030. Why the government cannot and has not acted early on this is really baffling to me. On the private sector side, a series of corporations operating in Canada have partnered with the Canada Plastic Pact, a member of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Global Plastic Pact Network, to commit to 4 actionable targets by 2025, including all plastic packaging designed to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable, half of plastic packaging being effectively recycled, and all plastic packaging containing 30% of recycled content. These initiatives are encouraging to hear, but they are a very tiny step to end the plastic waste problem in Canada. We need a comprehensive and interlinked waste legislation framework. For example, encouraging recycling is only one part of the circular economy. Manufacturers must use a maximum amount of recycled material in their new products to capture the value of the recycled material and avoid exhaustion of natural resources. Bold policies like this will help us shift to a more sustainable economy. So the question is, where does our plastic waste currently end up? Most of our plastic waste, well above 90%, is exported to the United States, with other countries such as Vietnam, Malaysia, Honduras, Turkey, and Chile sharing the rest. The trade of plastic waste, however, is internationally regulated by the Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Waste and their Disposal, which was adopted on March 1989 as a response to mounting controversy over wealthy nations exporting hazardous waste to developing countries with no capacity to adequately manage it, and therefore provoking massive environmental and health issues. Its main objectives are to reduce hazardous waste generation and promote environmentally sound management, restrict transboundary movement of hazardous waste, except to nations that are capable of environmentally sound management, and create a regulatory system to frame permissible trade of hazardous waste. Although Canada ratified in December 2020 new amendments to the Basel Convention, requiring prior informed consent controls for all but the cleanest types of plastic waste, export trade between treaty parties. The United States haven't done so, which has many experts worried about a 2020 bilateral agreement with the U.S. allowing exports of plastic waste to the South, with less strict controls than the Basel Convention and possible re-exportation to developing countries. With heavily mediatized case of international waste dispute involving Canada in the recent years, I cannot say that I am confident our plastic waste will be adequately managed under our current agreements. So, in the spirit of all this information, I completely agree with the principle and intent of Bill C-204. I will echo the words of Senator Frum. Quote, "By continuing to export our plastic waste, we are failing in our duty for environmental stewardship." Close quote. For centuries, the wealthy nations of the world have imposed a burden on developing countries by making them deal with our toxic waste. This is environmental racism and colonialism, period. The world is not our dumping ground, and to continue to act like it is, it reinforces the colonial tendencies of our country grappling with the consequences of its own actions. The wealth of a nation should not justify the transfer of responsibility of our waste. In fact, it should be quite the opposite. We have some of the highest capacities in the world to manage waste in an environmentally sound way. The above applies to pollution reduction and environmental protection as a whole, including climate legislation. Canada needs to stop lagging. We still don't have a climate accountability bill that will harmonize our law with our international commitments, that will make our country cleaner, and that will make our economy more competitive. We shouldn't be afraid of legislation that will make our people healthier, happier, and ultimately more prosperous. I long for a time where these issues stop being political and we start focusing on our needs as humans. That being said, I do believe that this is an issue that needs a detailed and careful study, especially given the potential impact on interprovincial and international trade, and the fact that it affects many sectors. As responsible citizens of the world, we want Canada to deal with its waste, and I believe that you will agree with me that we must quickly determine the paths to eliminate unnecessary waste production and cure the problem at its roots. As the critic of this bill, I wholeheartedly agree to send this bill to committee. Colleagues, I will leave you with these wise words from Pete Seeger's song, "If it can be reduced." Quote, "If it can be reduced, reused, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, redesigned, or simply removed from production." Thank you very much. Merci, miigwech.